Hello, I'm Daniel Goleman, and I'm glad to be here, at least virtually, with you in Houston. I couldn't make it in person, but I'm with you digitally, and we'll have a live Q&A session after my remarks. I also want to say how much I applaud the Holt House initiative to bring social and emotional learning into the schools here in Houston. And I'd like to review for you the essential role these human skills play in the social development of children and in preparing them with the fundamentals for success in life. Let me give you an example of why these skills matter so much. This is an incident that happened in a middle school in an inner city in the Northeast. 3 11-year-old boys are on their way into gym class, if you can imagine it. And the first kid is walking in front of the 2 others. And that first kid is a little pudgy, not that athletic. The kids behind him are real jocks. They're very good at playing soccer, which is the game they're going to be playing in their gym class. And the 2 kids are ridiculing the kid in front. One of them says in a very sarcastic tone, "Oh, so you think you're going to play soccer?" His voice kind of dripping with contempt. And at that, the pudgy kid stops, takes a deep breath as though steeling himself for the confrontation ahead, turns to his ridiculer and says, "Yeah, I'm going to try to play soccer. I'm not very good at it. What I'm good at is art. Show me anything. I can draw it really well. But you're so good at soccer. Someday I'd like to be as good as you are." And what happens? All of a sudden, the first kid drops his whole kind of ridicule approach and says to the other kid, "You know, you're really not so bad." Comes around, puts his arm around him, says, "Maybe I can show you a thing or two." And they go walking off to class, to the gym. Now, that was a moment, particularly in the inner city school, the middle school, that could easily have led to a fight. But instead, it was transformed into a closer relationship, into the beginning of a friendship. That embodies what we call emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is a teachable skill set. And I argue that it's one of 3 essential skills every child is going to need for success in life. The first skill is the ability to take in information, to understand it well and thoroughly, and to make sound decisions. That's a cognitive ability. The second is also cognitive. That's knowing how to learn. We can teach children today every technical skill we think they may need for the years ahead once they're in the workforce. But the fact of the matter is that work life and technology is changing so quickly that most or many of the skills today's children will need for their career success don't exist today. So what they need to do is to be able to learn new abilities. The third skill set is how to manage themselves and how to handle their relationships. That's what we call emotional intelligence. And I'd argue that this is the fundamental skill that catalyzes the other 2. The ability to think clearly, the ability to learn. And it also, as that 11-year-old demonstrated, is the key to effective relationships throughout life. Let me share with you some recent findings and understandings from neuroscience that make it a little clearer just why emotional intelligence is fundamental not just to how we handle ourselves and our success in relationships, but also our success in school as learners and our success in the workforce. If you see this as a side view of the brain, the eyes would be up here. The frontal part of the brain and the curly part at the top, the wavy part, is the neocortex. This is the thinking brain. This is the part of the brain that goes to school, that makes sound decisions, that takes in information, understands it, makes sound decisions, is creative. It's the thinking brain. The learner is in the prefrontal cortex. This is the site of attention, working memory. Everything that we acquire in terms of our understanding in the world enters the brain through this circuitry. This is also the brain's executive center, where we make our decisions. Now, the other part of the brain that's extremely important is what's called the feeling brain, the emotional centers. They're in the midbrain between the ears. And the center for emotions is absolutely crucial because in the design of the brain, this has huge connectivity to the thinking brain. And in moments of crisis, in order to survive, the brain is designed so that the emotional centers can hijack the rest of the brain when there's an urgency. That was the design for survival when we were confronting saber-toothed tigers, but the same design of the brain holds today. The problem is we're dealing with symbolic threats, not real physical threats, you know. For a child, it's other kids won't play with me, or I'm not being treated fair. All of that can arouse intense feelings of anger, of sadness, of anxiety. And when that happens, these centers drive the brain. So a child, for example, who's very upset, very angry, can only think at that moment about what is causing the upset. Not what the teacher is saying, not what parents are saying, but attention fixates on the cause of the emotional pain. That means that memory also is slanted toward other things that are similar to that in life. So a child can't take in new information at that point. So in order to learn well, a child has to also learn how to manage his or her own emotional state. There was a very telling study done of high school students who were in the top 5% on potential for math. These were the smartest kids at math. And they were followed for a year to see how well they actually did in their math class. And it was very interesting. Most of them did very well, as predicted by the test. But a good group of them, good sized group of them, did surprisingly poorly. And when they studied exactly what those students were experiencing when they were learning math, when they're doing their homework, when they're in math class, a very telling finding emerged. And that was that those who did poorly were in the grip of anxiety and upset 4 times more often than they were in a clear, focused, calm state. That is, the emotional brain was driving them so they couldn't learn. The kids who did very well were 5 times more often in a state where the learning centers were more active than the emotional centers. And that's the optimal configuration for learning. There's another way to look at this. And this has to do with the relationship between performance and stress. When performance is high, when stress is medium, not too low, not too high. If we don't have enough what's called good stress, then we're unfocused. These are the kids who are sitting in a classroom just bored out of their skull. They're not paying attention, they're daydreaming, they're not engaged, they're not motivated, they're not focused. As a child, or actually as someone at work, becomes more motivated, focused, attentive, and so on, they go up this arc to a zone of optimal neural harmony and optimal cognitive efficiency. It's a brain state. It's the state where workers work at their best, where students learn at their best. It's a state of very clear focus, of optimal taking in of information and understanding it. It's also, interestingly enough, a very pleasant state. Now, if there's more and more pressure, more and more stress, too little time and too much to do and so on, you get into a high anxiety state and performance plummets. So from the point of view of helping our children learn at their best, we want to have teachers who are able to help them get and stay in this zone for optimal performance. And by the way, I do a lot of work on leadership. And if any of you are leaders at work, you should also be aware the part of a leader's task, as I see it, is to help people at work get and stay in this optimal zone. Not too stressed, so they're so anxious they can't think clearly or make good decisions, and not so unmotivated that they're disengaged from work. Now,